Hi, everyone. This is Lauren Baker with Search Engine Journal. Welcome to today's episode of the SEJ Show. With me today, I have Ben Steele, Senior
Hello.
Editor of eBooks at SEJ. Hey, Ben, how's it going?
Pretty good. How are you today?
Good. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Oh, I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. So, obviously, like I said, Ben leads all editing on the ebook side here at SEJ. So we're going to talk a bit about ebooks, specifically a ebook / study that we've put out for the second year in a row, the State of SEO. And then I believe today we just launched. Is it today, Ben? We just launched the State of PPC.
Yep.
Is it okay?
Today is PPC Trends that went live today.
Oh,
Yes.
PPC Trends. Gotcha.
Mhm.
So it's good timing on that front.
Mm.
So I want to talk a little bit about our study today, as well as just producing ebooks in general and large
Mhm.
pieces of content, and then
Mhm.
everything that goes on, in the kitchen to make that happen, in the back of the house versus the front of
Sure.
the house, what everyone sees. But first, what I'd like to do is give a shout out to our sponsors that make today's episode possible. Today's episode of the SEJ Show is brought to you by Paved. Paved is a programmatic newsletter advertising solution that we've been working with in the past at SEJ, and it's pretty fantastic. And then, as many of you, I'm sure many of you are familiar with Moz. So, Moz is the SEO tool that's been around for quite a long time, and they're doing some really exciting stuff right now. So, thank you to Paved and Moz for sponsoring today's show. I see some folks are saying hi already. So if you're watching live
Hi,
on
friends.
YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, my Twitter account, Brent's Twitter account, SEJ's Twitter account, just say hi. We can see you most of the time. So really exciting to get started. So before we start talking about the state of SEO, ebooks, kind of what's behind the curtain in SEJ, Ben, how about if you take a chance to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, sure. I got my start in SEO as a freelancer when I was living in Canada. I've been around. I was born in England, then I lived in Canada for a while, and now I'm in the United States in Idaho. And yeah, I got my start freelancing. Then I moved into agency work for a few years, 5 or 6 years in agency work, and then I saw the role open here and jumped at the chance to apply because all throughout my career, I used SEJ as my resource, as my go to if I needed to learn something or reference something. So I was like, oh yeah, I want to work for them.
Awesome. So how long ago did you get started in SEO?
How long ago? I've probably it's tough because I didn't start as an SEO. I started as a freelance writer, but and that was right out of college. So 10 years ago by now. But I discovered very quickly that if you want to make money as a writer, you write for marketing, and if you write for marketing, you have to learn SEO. And so that's kind of how I got my start in SEO. Is just kind of organically as I was learning what kinds of clients I wanted to work for, where the money was, where I could make a living, and then I learned enough about it that I thought it was interesting enough to try and pursue a more permanent career.
Amazing. And where in Canada did you live?
Ontario.
I just got back from Ontario.
Oh, really?
I was in Toronto for like 2 days last week. 2.5 days.
Very cool. I was in a little town called, well, it's not that little, but Kitchener-Waterloo, which is about an hour outside of Toronto.
Waterloo's where the big college is, right?
Yeah, big college, big university town. Yeah.
What's the college?
The University of Waterloo.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I found Toronto to be a very interesting town. I've been to Montreal twice, Vancouver once. I was in downtown Toronto. I would not recommend to myself staying in downtown Toronto during the winter with all the construction going on again. But some of the areas that I visited were quite beautiful, especially once you left that fog and haze of downtown Toronto and actually saw a little bit of sunlight. It was pretty incredible. And one of the main reasons. Cool go ahead.
Oh, it's a really cool city. I went to college in Toronto, York University. I actually did my degree in theater, and so it was a really fun town to do theater in. But yeah.
So you got your degree in theater, and then you got into writing. and then from writing, you learn that you should write for marketing, and that will help you expand your career. So, how'd you bridge from theater into writing?
So I started freelancing writing because theater doesn't make money. um, you have to be quite exceptional to make a career of theater. And as highly as I think of myself, I don't think I had I didn't have the same drive when it came to theater that other people did. But I kind of discovered it in writing, and so I moved into kind of a more business marketing world, and discovered that I just kind of liked that more. But theater will always be very close to my heart. But I'm not sure it was something I was prepared to make a career of. And one of the reasons I love SEO so much is coming from a theater background is, SEO is all about human experience in tech, right? What is the connection between what a user needs and wants, and the tech that serves it to them. And so my human experience focus coming from theater, I think, has led me down some interesting paths when it comes to how I think about SEO.
It's really interesting to hear. I've met a lot of people in the world of SEO that are musicians or were actually professional musicians beforehand. And a lot of what they've brought up was just like the ability to think with both sides of the brain, the ability to be creative, the ability to improvise. They weren't all jazz musicians, but I find that SEO can be a bit of jazz from time to time, especially around an update. So around a Google update time. So that's really interesting to hear. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about this new study / ebook that we dropped, the State of SEO, the second annual State of SEO. Could you please tell us a little bit about this project, why we embarked on it, how it was set up, and I guess just to begin with some of the results.
Yeah, sure. I actually joined. The company was partway through prepping the project when I joined the team. I joined 6-7 months ago. When was it? April? Time. What is time?
Has it been that long? Yeah.
I think so. But so I came on just as we were kind of getting ready. The survey, I think, had already been sent out at that point, and we had some changes and things in the departments, and people moved around and changed roles, and I got a fun promotion, and so it was an exciting time. But I kind of came into the project with new eyes. And it was already on the go. We'd started doing it one way, but we decided that we picked a new direction on it in terms of how we were evaluating the data. We changed course on some of the decisions that we made last year, and we think that is going to be kind of a continuing trend. Statistical analysis is very complicated, and there's a lot of room for different ways of running it, different interpretations. There's of course room for error, and so we're refining as we go, kind of with this big project that we do. How do we make the best judgments that we can based on the information that we have? How do we reduce the chances that there may be things happening in error, and how do we be kind of transparent and draw helpful insights while doing our best due diligence. So it's been a very fascinating project from the get-go.
Have you worked on many studies like this previously?
Nope. This was a learning experience for me.
Awesome.
Getting hands-on with data like this, first-party data like this, was really, really cool. And it was an exciting journey. We had a lot of back and forth internally about the ways we should present things, the kinds of insights that we were drawing, and what do we base these on, and how much external knowledge do we include in the report, and things like that, are kind of a super interesting series of discussions that we had.
Amazing. So, how many respondents did we have to the initial survey and
We had
study?
about 3,600, I believe.
Mhm.
Hmm.
All from the US or international?
From all over the world, actually. We had respondents from Spain, Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, Australia, Canada, England. Um, that is not an exhaustive list.
And what are some of the preliminary findings that really stuck out to you as part of the overall state of SEO study?
There's some interesting things about our audience, and this is something that I note in the that I took care to note in the survey. That Search Engine Journal has an audience, a broad audience of SEOs, but the survey results speak to our the SEOs in our audience. They don't necessarily, they're not the last word on the industry of an entire country, for example. So there are definitely some insights we can draw about the state of the industry as a whole, but I wanted to be very careful about the way we're talking about things, because I did notice that, for example, almost 30% of the respondents we had 2 or fewer years of experience. And I think that it's
Mm,
fair to say for sure that that is indication of things like growth in the industry, or there's a lot of new folks joining the industry. But I
right.
think it's also, it says a lot about our audience. While we do have very many respondents who had, 4 to 5 or 10 or more years of experience, we produce a lot of educational content. And so we become a resource for a lot of folks who are newer in the industry. And so I think it says a lot about Search Engine Journal as well as the industry as a whole growing, that we have an active, engaged audience of new SEO professionals.
Did that grow over the previous year
Yes.
to the best of your knowledge?
We had a pretty significant growth in the number of respondents who had, I think, 0 to 4 years of experience.
Wow, interesting. So the industry is still growing. There's still people being new to the industry or
Mhm.
just transferring over to this industry. So that's
Mhm.
very interesting.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think the report sponsor Moz actually said it best. We included a quote from them that says, as long as people need to find things, there's going to
yes.
be SEO. The SEO will be relevant, and so I think that explains why this industry has seen so much growth, even with the upset of the last few years, and economic issues on the horizon, like the potential for a recession that some people
Right.
argue has already struck, and things like that. I think that SEO, digital marketing is some of those industries, or one of the industries that has done quite well,
Mhm.
for myriad reasons. But I think that goes a long way to explain why we've had such a high response from folks who are new to the industry, especially with things like a lot of industries did layoffs. And so
Yes.
I would expect that we maybe the marketing SEO industry has seen some new employees from other folks being laid off elsewhere.
Got you. Got you. Then also, like one thing that struck me is that, you know, I feel like we talk about COVID all the time, but it is part of life. So during COVID and lockdown, we saw a lot of companies stop their advertising spend, but they
Mhm.
continue to invest in SEO because typically that investment was a lot less capital than was spent
Mhm.
on advertising. And at the same time, not for everybody. I'm sure there's some really good some really good experts out there on the PPC side that can turn $1 into three
Mhm.
dollars or $1 into 250 or whatever. But most of what I've heard over the past year is that the return on investment from advertising campaigns is diminishing. Um,
Mhm.
so more organic forms of marketing or performance marketing, such as SEO and even affiliate marketing,
Mhm.
have been on the rise, not just from a staffing perspective, but from an investment perspective, and it's just really gotten a lot of attention.
And I can
Um,
confirm that based on what I saw with the PPC Trends ebook as well. For that ebook, we ask several experts in the PPC industry to weigh in on what they think trends were over the last year and will be in the future. And we consulted, I think, 22 experts in this version of the ebook, and I definitely saw some folks saying that inflation in costs in PPC is a concern. Price conscious consumers have been a concern for PPC advertisers. I've seen some B2B PPC advertisers saying that some of the changes in PPC platforms have not been good for B2B advertising at all, and that they're also seeing lower returns from social media ad spending as well.
Interesting. Interesting. So that's a interesting first point. Um, you had said that when we did the survey, we had people chiming in from all over the world,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Not just not just the Americas and the UK,
Mm-hmm.
but almost everywhere. Was there any specific locales that are really on the uppity up at the moment that you noticed from the data that came in?
Australia.
Interesting.
Australia pulled in the highest average salary among our respondents,
Hmm.
even higher than the US, higher than Canada, higher than England. And they also had a lot of folks with not a whole lot of experience as well. Like they had quite a few folks with 4 or fewer years of experience, I think, combined with an extremely high average salary. So if I had to pick one place in the world where SEO is hot right now, it's Australia.
Why do you think that is?
Um, based on the data alone, it's not easy to tell. One of our contributors, Roger Monty, just finished penning an article about that will be releasing soon, where he actually talked to an expert in Australia on the ground and said that it's hard for agencies in Australia to keep employees because there's a big growth in in-house brands in Australia who
Mhm.
need SEO support and who are hiring out of agencies at high salary levels. And so based on that quote, and I will need to track it down. When we move on, I will find out who exactly said that quote. But that article will go live probably in a few days. That's kind of one of the things I can point to. Yeah.
Sweet. That's really good to hear. So if you're looking to move somewhere with a high demand of SEO and high salaries, Australia might be the best place if you can get a
The
visa.
US wasn't
Um,
too far behind. The US
mhm.
industry is growing as well.
Have you been to Australia, Ben? It seems like you've lived or been in most Commonwealths.
No, I have not. I really want to go though. I have a friend who lives in Australia.
Yeah, likewise, likewise. Haven't been there yet, or New Zealand. Haven't been to
Mm.
Oceania at all. So, what were some of the besides like experience and locales? What were some of the big focuses that the big initiatives at SEO that you found that SEOs were focusing on this year, maybe more so than the year before?
So what we've seen, and what we're kind of we're reading into it, we're trying to read between the lines a little bit into the data with this, is that we saw that new strategies took kind of a backseat, and SEOs in general were focusing on things like technical SEO, and user experience, those kind of core basics. And what we're accounting for that is there was such explosive growth in digital marketing in general over the last few years during the height of the pandemic, um, that we think that a lot of SEOs, due to the very sudden increase in competition, tried a bunch of novel strategies. And now that there's been a little bit of a correction in the technology and digital marketing sphere, I think people are going a little bit back to basics. driven a little bit by Google's updates over the last couple years. They just released the page experience update for desktop was rolled out this year, and so I think that is driving some of those refocusing, some of that refocusing. But that the kind of the macro environment is another reason that we put behind that.
Very cool. Very cool. I know I always focused on technical SEO. UX not as much. Probably recent. I also feel like a lot of the companies that I either work with or been in touch with or advise and things like that, everyone seems to be, or like it just seems like the past year or a year and a half, everyone seems to be doing a quote unquote rebrand, which is just a redesign, right? So like updating the site, updating the logos, updating this, updating that. And then you, as an SEO, it's always nice to be brought into that conversation, right? Because sometimes you're not. Sometimes you just wake up one day and the entire site's different, right? So with UX being something that's really important from a Google perspective, I think that information is bubbled up. So the more that we can communicate that, I feel, on SEJ, the more chances there are of more SEOs or organic SEOs, technical SEOs, whatever we call it, having a seat at the table during those similar types of endeavors on the client or even the company that you work for side. So, one thing too is return on investment. So we had talked about this a little bit with things like, SEO and affiliate marketing becoming extremely hot because there's just much higher of an ROI there than there may be in PPC, or the ROI in PPC may have dropped a little bit over, the past 3-6 months, year, especially with Performance Max rolling out and everything else. What about in terms of SEOs reporting an increased ROI?
So this has
what
been
kind of information did you see there?
This has been sort of an interesting mixed bag. We had about 58% of respondents said that their ROI, acronyms, increased either a little bit or a lot. So 58% of respondents saw an increase, which is great. That's more than half. But the remaining 41% saw either no change or a decrease, which is kind of a lot of people.
Yes.
So we also saw a very surprising, we asked people how satisfied they were with their SEO results. And we had 29% say that they were ambivalent. They were neither satisfied nor dissatisfied, which is pretty interesting. That's a pretty significant percentage of SEOs who are saying, and so we have some theories. We really don't have any hard data on kind of where or why this might be occurring, but we have some data that we've kind of drawn some conclusions from. That they're relatively loose conclusions, but they're our best educated guesses about what might be happening. And it's based on what we saw when we asked the SEO professionals who responded to talk about both the things that they're asked to do, the things that they're expected to deliver, and the methods they use to track their progress. And what we found was that the responses didn't line up here. Not exactly. There wasn't a one-to-one ratio of people saying, well, we were asked to deliver this, and so we tracked the same thing. We were asked to deliver. Here, let me scroll down to an example here.
Sure.
So web traffic was the top most requested service. It's the thing that most people said, that either their employer or clients want web traffic. But page views was second place in tracked metrics of what people were tracking for performance. That's kind of a minor change, but we'll move on. Lead generation was the second most requested service. Qualified leads was fifth place as a metric used to track success. So you're being asked to perform lead generation activity, and that took the second to top spot in services that people are requesting, and yet the 5th spot in what people are tracking. So now I do have to say that these were pick 3 questions. They were pick up to 3. So it's not an exactly 1-to-1 ratio. I'm not saying that a bunch of people who I'm not saying that the same people picked these options. I hope I'm expressing myself clearly here, but I think it's interesting. We also had keyword rankings was only the 3rd most requested service, but it was the top tracked metric. So people are focusing really hard on keyword rankings as a metric of success, but it's only being asked for so much. And so we think that there may be a mismatch between what SEOs are being asked to produce and what they're being held accountable by, the metrics they're being held accountable for. And I think that there's a lot of bunk metrics in SEO. There's a lot of vanity metrics. And so I think that proving ROI has been and maybe always will be a difficulty in SEO.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because I don't think I've ever had a client come out, reach out to me and say, hey, we want to increase our keyword visibility, right? Like, of course you want to rank above the competition. You want to, but the idea is to get someone to click and then take action, right? On the site where the UX component comes in. And then I've also had people tell me, well, hey, this report's great, but this visibility stuff is just SEO mumbo jumbo. We're number 2 today, we're number 3 tomorrow, we're number 6 afterwards, then we're number 1, and then we're, everyone kind of, I think most people realize that Google cycles results for a lot of queries, and it's always changing. The amount of shopping inserts into the results have increased dramatically in the past 2 weeks as well. So, and a lot of spam, which probably get into in another thing. It's kind of funny. It's kind of funny how Google will penalize almost anyone for trying to spam their organic index. But you know what? If someone's spamming a merchant center, they'll just allow it to appear right on page 1. So you go to click on something, and you get redirected to a landing page with a really weird landing page.
The merchant center and the ad policies are super interesting. I included a screenshot in a recent ebook about a Google ad that I saw that was promoting private blog networks, which is explicitly against Google's guidelines, and yet they're letting people advertise for them.
It's pretty wild.
Yeah,
it's pretty crazy. The whole thing's pretty crazy. Well, especially like with Merchant Center, there's an organic component of it as well, right? Like, you typically don't get the organic visibility unless you're running ads, but you do get organic visibility. Like it's like Yahoo used to be years back. So they really have to, especially with that crossover, definitely have to make sure they're fitting within the guidelines. But like, to my point is like, yes, it's nice to have rankings, but it's much better to have an ROI. Are people actually purchasing or clicking on an ad? Like whatever that intent at the end of the day is.
And what's interesting about that is we had on, what do you use to track your success? We had revenue increases, and that was the 4th most popular option. I'm surprised that wasn't higher because, that's what we're all here for, right?
There are a lot of SEOs, though, that don't consider themselves to be associated with the revenue component.
That makes sense.
Of organic search, which makes sense if they think that way.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Okay, anything else that showed up on that that may have not lined up with expectations versus what someone's doing from a day to day, or what someone considers to be success on their end?
I think that there's a lot of forward-looking stuff that I think that we will discover next year, that what people are focusing on, what people are looking forward to this year, maybe. I don't know if this statement will come back to bite me, but maybe the wrong place to look. So when we asked the people that responded to the survey what they're expecting to spend a lot of time on next year, what they're looking for in terms of what is going to cause a lot of disruption in the industry, what's going to be emergent factors impacting SEO and search, almost bar and away, the most popular answer was automation and AI, which makes sense. If you're familiar with news in the industry, then you know that it's a big deal right now. Google's making a ton of updates to all of their platforms, integrating and services, integrating more AI, more automation. But having just done the PPC Trends ebook, the PPC experts had a lot of interesting things to say about automation. They also, almost all of them, had something to say about automation, but most of them seem to be of the opinion that focusing too much on it is a bit of a trap. That automation is an opportunity, to focus in on your core understanding of digital marketing, of your audience, of how to connect with people. And a lot of them were saying, automation is going to cause a lot of disruption, and you should be prepared for it, prepared to use the new platforms and understand the different forms of data that are coming in GA4, getting ready to use Performance Max and things like that. But that if you're hyper focusing on that automation element, you might be missing its true value, which is allowing you to go hands off on some of the things that don't matter as much, and really focus in on creating content that resonates with your audience.
I see. Very interesting. So you don't see automation or AI as being a replacement for writers then?
Not everyone agrees with me. In fact, we had one expert in the PPC Trends ebook who it does explicitly say that they see automation becoming a replacement for content creation experts. But for the most part, I'm seeing a sentiment that focus on performing the activities that automation can't do quite well yet, which is your human understanding of your vertical, your audience, and kind of know where the automation is going, know how to use it, know how to gain its benefits, know where its weaknesses are. But if you're too hyper focused on the nitty gritty of the automation features, you might be, or you're too worried about the upset that automation might cause, then you might be missing the true value in it.
I also saw that the question for which emergent factors in SEO will be most important in the next 2 years, the top three were, number 3, EAT and trusted sources. Number 2, core web vitals. Kind of surprised to see that. And then number 1, machine learning and AI. So these are 2 specific parts of this study/survey that machine learning and AI dominated. Probably what I would say EAT and core web vitals I kind of see as a 2020, 2021 conversation. EAT been around forever, but it's gotten more important the past 4 years or so, especially recently with some updates. So do you think that's fair? Do you think it's a fair representation that machine learning is the most emergent factor, the most important emergent factor in the next 2 years? Where do you personally see that in terms of being important or not?
I think the thing about SEO as an industry that I've noticed is that when something is an important trend, it's going to stay that way for a long time. Google has been pushing UX for a long time. Google has been pushing the core web vitals for a few years, and we still have people talking about it. And it's the same with automation. This march to automation has been gradual and slow. We've had a few updates over the last few years. That you can see things getting more automated, and things in the improvements in the algorithms, things like, I would argue that no-click results is an impact of automation. And so, and I think that in terms of the fact that we are going to have to change the way we think about some things, I do see automation as a big impact. Let's take GA4 as an example. And the I think a good microcosm is the change of a bounce rate to, I think it's called engagement rate. The change from a negative metric into a positive metric, right? That is tracking the number of people that take an undesirable action, and instead flipping it over and tracking the number of people who take a variety of desirable actions on your site as a metric. And so I think that that's one of the things that automation is going to force us to think about, as especially in PPC. I know it's, they're not apples to apples, but they're related. As the platforms become more advanced, as they include more automated features in them, and marketers lose some of the control and fine tuning they're used to, and because engagement rate, for example, is a collection of several different things that a user might do to prove their engagement, versus bounce rate, which was one very specific thing, right? So you're losing a little bit of control of the how fine-tuned you can get with the data. And I think that rather than panic about that, it's going to be about changing how we think about these metrics and what they mean. And yeah, I hope that makes sense.
It does. Very cool. So let's get away from the results of the study real quick and talk about ebooks in general.
Sure.
Ebooks are your bread and butter.
Mm-hmm.
And I think ebooks are a little bit of a dated term as well. Let's call them something like maybe large content projects or special content projects or whatever we want to do.
Yeah.
But how has editing and just managing the entire process of formulating these ebooks and large studies, which is a big part of what we do at SEJ, a big part of what most B2B companies, SaaS companies do, things like that. What are the differences that you found between putting together an ebook like the State of SEO or PPC Trends versus the more quote unquote traditional article, nonlinear blog writing, even blog writing as part of a overall topic hub strategy? What are some of the differences and some things that you enjoy about it, and just some advantages that you may find from an ebook creation experience?
Interesting question. Okay. Ebooks they're an interesting beast because they have unique difficulties as well as unique advantages. The biggest unique difficulty is they require a lot of buy-in. And by that, I mean, they require someone to not only have the time to sit down and read it, but to go through the process of discovering, deciding to download it, going through the process of downloading it. We have a form where people have to enter the emails. So there's a lot of there are a lot of steps where people can bounce off the idea of reading an ebook, right? So the thing where with articles, it's a lot easier. They're a lot more accessible for readers. Not only are they shorter, they're just there. You click on it, you read it, done, cool. You can skim it if you want, or you can read the first paragraph, decide it's not for you, and leave. And so I think that articles have a lot of potential for kind of presenting a high volume of information, a lot of really cool, interesting updates. And they're a very useful learning resource. But ebooks, we have to be very careful with them about what content we're including, what content we're excluding. And we have a lot of internal conversations about what makes an ebook a complete product. One thing that we're constantly going back and forth on is how much do we link from an ebook to the website? At what point does too many links to other resources make an ebook not feel like a complete resource? But on the other hand, at what point does including all of the information you could possibly want make an ebook an unviable product for anyone to actually sit down and read? So curation is one of the most difficult parts of my job, because it's in the quest for the best product that we can make about any given topic. We have to be careful, because we want to deliver a product that is the final product that is helpful and useful, but also manageable in scope, not just for us, but for readers as well. Because the longer an ebook gets, the more resources it takes, especially on smaller devices and things like that. So that's kind of something that I'm always thinking about.
Very interesting.
Ebooks.
What about when it comes to taking the content out of the PDF downloadable environment and making it open for crawl, or making it open for almost anyone to obtain? Also, I have another thing too, is like, so if we publish an ebook, right? If we publish an ebook in November 2022, and then we look at some of the information from that ebook in February or March 2023, there's a high chance that some of the things have changed, right? Just because of the way Google is. And I know we refresh our ebooks on an annual basis, but we're constantly refreshing our blog content or our written content on the site because of those changes which may happen. So I just wanted to get an idea if there's any difficulties, or how do you typically handle that from an ebook planning perspective?
So one thing we're doing next year, I joined the ebooks team this year, and we produced a lot of ebooks this year. One thing we're doing next year is we are reducing the total number of ebooks, and we are focusing in on some of our core topics and things that we think will require some updates. So things that perform well that will likely need an update next year. And one thing that's interesting that I found is that when we are doing an ebook, I actually discover in the process of cataloging our content that already exists, I often discover things that need to be refreshed. And so there are quite a few of our on-site updates that come out of the ebooks program, just because I'm like, I want to reference this, but it needs to be updated. It's 2 years old. So I see it as a bit of a symbiosis. I think they serve two different things. An ebook program by its nature cannot be as minute up to date as an article content program. But I think the advantage of ebooks is I take a topic and I do a deep dive into the content we have about that topic and look at any updates that we may have missed or not written about in a while. And so my research often produces new articles and points where we would want to refresh something that feels a little bit old. And so I see it as a marriage of function between two programs that serve different purposes.
Excellent. So a couple more questions for you.
Sure.
What's the difference between an ebook and a white paper?
Oh God. Well, the State of SEO is more like a white paper. I see white papers as more kind of I would hope that a white paper is more substantive with research and data, whereas an ebook, we can get a little bit more into the weeds with an ebook. I also tend to think that white papers should be shorter. White papers, specifically because of the target audience, white papers normally target high up industry folks, right? People who are looking for trends, data, things to inform their strategies. Those are busy people. So we want to keep our white papers a little bit shorter to respect their time. Whereas ebooks, many of them are designed to be skimmed or downloaded and used as a resource in the future, where someone will be like, I need to know this specific thing, and then you can use the search function in the ebook to find the chapter that you need, and we interlink the chapters so that you can look at the table of contents, be like, I need that. So the ebooks are designed slightly differently to be more comprehensive resources. And actually, within the ebooks program, I'm piloting some different types of ebooks, some longer, some shorter, that are even more refined in terms of scope. And the dark side of link building is one of those kind of newer ones, where we go really in depth about something that's very specific in a limited scope ebook.
Yeah, we've done besides the dark side of link building, we've also done a couple that are very industry driven, like I think content marketing for
Mhm,
lawyers or the legal industry and stuff like that. So
mhm.
kind of interesting to look at those numbers as well, right? Because at first you see like, oh, it didn't get as many downloads as the State of SEO, but then because it's only people that are working with the legal industry would
Right.
be of interest.
It's very niche, and so we also have to balance that as well in terms of meeting our kind of internal expectations and metrics, right? We want to produce
Mhm.
things that are highly valuable for a specific audience. We also need to produce things that are highly valuable for a general audience. And so
Mm.
within the program, it's about, we have conversations. I talk with Heather in marketing a lot about kind of um, where the balance is going to be between these kind of more niche products that serve a smaller, very specific audience versus our general, high performance products that are more accessible to everyone.
Very interesting. One thing I just thought of is that, also we have a bit of a differentiator, well, to a degree, of church and state when it comes to advertising or sponsors and the content in ebooks.
Mhm.
We do have our sponsors come in and give quotes and stuff like that, and sometimes write a little bit. So maybe it's not that large of a degree, but and in a lot of the and a lot of the SaaS fields that I've worked in, especially like identity management,
Mhm.
identity security, stuff like that. I do get a lot of pitches.
Mhm.
I don't know how they got my email, but I do get a lot of pitches from like I don't know, the Gartner's, Coopinger, probably mispronouncing this, Coopinger Cole, a lot of the larger study oriented companies, and then smaller ones too, that you have to pay to have your company listed as part of that study within the content itself, not just sponsoring the ebook itself, but
Mm.
paying to have your company listed when they're doing comparisons, when they're looking at the top 8 trends, whatever it may be.
Mhm.
So it is kind of interesting that in our case, we're looking at more of the sponsor of the overall ebook and everything. Last question I have, and I was rambling there. Last question I have for you is, when it comes to ebooks and white papers, are you a portrait guy or a landscape guy?
Oh man. Can I quickly address that last point first?
Yes.
With the separation of church and state, that's something that I'm going to be thinking about very much, because we have some kind of tool focused content coming out in the ebooks program for
Mm.
next year. Don't tell anyone I told you.
Shh.
And that's something that I'm looking to solve, because from an editorial point of view, I absolutely want to keep that kind of separate. I do not want to be making any kind of um, wholehearted recommendation of something where there's been money exchanged, right? But we also have our sponsors, and many of our sponsors are B2B focused SEO tools and things like that. So navigating that relationship is going to be very interesting, and it's something that we'll do in a very transparent way.
Absolutely.
It's a very interesting discussion, but I like the way we do things where I obviously prefer to clearly mark sponsorships. We love our sponsors a lot, and I like the opportunities we give them to sponsor a whole ebook. It also lets us kind of um really kind of, with fewer sponsors for a product, I feel like it delivers better value. um when you have fewer very specific sponsors to a targeted product. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Anyway, your question regarding portrait and landscape. I like landscape for white papers. I hate working in landscape because there aren't a whole lot of tools out there there aren't a lot of writing tools specifically that work particularly well in landscape. I was fighting with Google Docs for quite a long time to get the State of SEO to work in a landscape format. But I learned all the things I need to learn, so it'll be easier next time.
Last question of the day. Who portrayed Doc Holliday better on the silver screen?
Ooh.
Dennis Quaid or Val Kilmer?
I mean, I gotta go Val Kilmer. I have his picture right up there.
For those of you who are listening, Ben does have a picture of Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday on his wall. Yeah, I agree. I think that Wyatt Earp was probably a better overall produced movie than Tombstone. But in terms of cinema, right? I think the Wyatt Earp was like an epic kind of like, well, Kevin Costner driven epic, like Dance with Wolves, right?
Right.
But Tombstone's just maybe it didn't have the budget that Wyatt Earp had. But when it came down to the actors,
from a performance
especially
perspective,
Val Kilmer, it's just incredible. The cast is, every time I watch that film, I pick up another younger actor who has like grown in the industry, almost like watching State of Grace. I'm dating myself here, but State of Grace was one of my favorite films as a kid, starring Sean Penn and Gary Oldman and John C. Reilly in one of his first acting roles.
Really? I might have to check. I don't think I've seen that. I will have to check that out.
It's a great film. It's a great film. It's about a guy named Terry Noonan, who is a police officer, used to be a thug running in the Hell's Kitchen in New York with the Irish mob. And he ran off, goes to like Boston or something, joins the police force, then he goes back undercover to bust. Burgess Meredith is in it. There's a big list of actors that are in that film, so you may enjoy it. And I was wrong on this earlier, but above Val Kilmer, who do you have on your wall back there?
That is Christopher Judge. He was in Stargate SG-1, and he's also the voice of Kratos in the new God of War games.
Nice. So I take it you're into sci-fi and gaming. Then.
Yes. Yes.
Besides SEO and ebooks. Okay, awesome. And then Ben, where can folks find you online?
They can find me on Twitter and LinkedIn. Those are the main places that I actually check these days.
Cool. And what's your Twitter handle?
It is at Benny Jammin S. Benny Jammins.
All right. And what about LinkedIn? Actually, I just wrote that. But if you wouldn't mind.
I think it's just Ben Steele. I have to look up my own LinkedIn to. That's me not being prepared. There we go.
No problem. Writer Ben Steele, or you can just go on LinkedIn and search for Ben Steele, search in journal. Ben, it's been a pleasure. I'm making it as we're doing the podcast planning for next year, making it a point to shine a light on some of the folks behind the scenes at Search Engine Journal, not just talking about what we do, but talking about what everyone else is doing, and then also learning from that. Right. So one of the goals of today was not just to promote the State of SEO study, which we did promote it, but as also on top of that, the learnings, the findings, the back and forth, the strategy, what can be utilized from an ebook perspective. And then I think in the future, I think one thing that we've done very well at SEJ is that we've taken some of these ebooks and then we do push them live over time, right? So another thing that we've also done is we've treated our ebook landing pages like traditional WordPress categories. So if you go to a lot of these ebook landing pages, like for link building or SEO for beginners or things like that, in addition to seeing the ebook download page, the links to the chapters, we also have the traditional WordPress river of the latest posts that are underneath that category underneath as well, which I think breathes life and blood into those static pages. And then the vice versa, by having that permanent content and that permanent information on a category page is linked to all the time, externally and internally, you add more value to that category page than just being a list of recent posts. So something to check out. We'll probably do a follow-up piece on it on the site if we haven't already. And again, Ben, it's been a pleasure. Anything you'd like to say before we drop off?
Oh, just thank you very much for having me on. This is a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank all of you that have listened today. Thank you, Ben of SEJ. Thank you, Paved and Moz, for sponsoring today's show.
Thank you, sponsors.
And looking forward to our next podcast next week. It's been a pleasure, Ben. Have a good one.
Yep, you too. Bye.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Search Engine Journal Show. If you liked this episode, subscribe to our channel for so much more and click the notification bell so you don't miss a thing.